Hi, Dave Scotland for cgswot.com, and today we're going to take a look at layer styles in After Effects. And traditionally layer styles were done in Photoshop and then your elements were brought into After Effects. But in recent releases of After Effects, layer styles can now be done within After Effects, and more importantly they can be animated within After Effects. So I thought we'd have a quick look, just a basic introductory look at layer styles in After Effects, and we're going to create this fairly simple logo design, and everything in the design is actually created within After Effects using just one or two effects, built-in effects and layer styles. So we'll get started. I'll just delete that reference picture. We'll start a new composition, so composition, new composition, and I'll be working in a widescreen aspect, 720x395 square pixels, 25 frames, and I'll keep it to about 5 seconds. I'm not sure whether we'll get time to animate anything, but 5 seconds should be fine. And the first thing we need to do in our comp, we'll just rename by clicking enter up in the project window, and we'll call that master, and we'll create a new solid by clicking layer, or highlight the master, clicking layer, new solid. We'll just click on the color swatch, and the color we're going for is a grey. So if you just go to a mid grey and then slide it up a little, we're going for something like a light grey. Click OK. We'll deal with the color as an adjustment layer over the top of everything later on, and we'll just click OK to that, and that can serve as our background for now. And I'll just show you briefly some of the power that layer styles have. So if we click on our text tool and click in the center here and just type in some text and just highlight that text and click the eyedropper for the character in the character window here, and just select the same color as our background. Now instantly our text disappears, but if we come up to the if we slide down in the text layer and right click layer styles, let's just try a drop shadow, and straight away you can see that what was an invisible text now is visible and actually has body, and actually gives quite a nice little 3D effect. So we'll just get rid of drop shadow, and what we're going to do is try to give this text the impression that it's punched the outline of the text into the material or the background layer underneath. So if we right click on layer styles, or on the layer, and just navigate to bevel and emboss, and what we're going to do is swap our direction from up to down, and we're also going to hide the background layer here for a moment, and we're going to go into our blending options, advanced blending options, and we're just going to slide that out to 0 for now. And what that actually means, if I switch off the background, is that the text has the layer style, but it doesn't actually have any body to it. It's just a layer style applied to the text outline, and that's going to be quite valuable as we move on. So if I switch on my background now, we still have the same effect, but the text itself doesn't have any color or body to it, and that's going to be fine for what we need at the moment. And the next thing we need to do is design a bit of a base plate for the text. And so if we grab our light grey layer here and Control D to duplicate it, and we'll just rename this base plate, And what we're going to do is we'll just hide our background layer for now, and we might just center up our text a little better, have it more in the center of the composition. And we'll grab our base plate, and we're going to put a rectangular mask around it. So if you double click on the rectangular mask, and we'll just bring up our mask tools there, and what we're going to do with the mask selected in the layers, we're going to hit Control T, which allows us to rescale, and by holding Control and Shift we'll scale from the center, and there we have it. And we'll just leave our background hidden there for a moment. And what we're going to do with our base plate is give it some layer style. The first layer style we'll use is a drop shadow. So let's give it a drop shadow there, and the drop shadow we'll use just the basic. We can unhide our background now. For the drop shadow, we can use just the basic drop shadow parameters that come up. And for our base plate, we're going to add another layer style, which is a gradient overlay. So if we come up into layer styles, gradient overlay, and we're just going to go into those gradient settings. We're going to change the blend mode to overlay, and we're going to come into the gradient settings, which brings up this window here, and we'll just swap the end swatch to a white color. We're going to click in the middle up the top and give it an opacity of 100, but then on both ends we're going to wind the opacity down to 0, and that's the effect that you get there. So we're getting this hot spot through the center there. Okay, and what we're going to do is actually give this base plate a fractal noise. So with it selected, we're going to come to our effects controls, and I like to right click on the effects control window, and we'll go noise and grain fractal noise, and that gives us a fractal noise there. And what we want to do is reduce the size. So if we go into our transform and untick uniform scaling, and we want the height to be about 1, and the width, it actually looks pretty good where it is. And we're also going to change the blending mode to overlay, and what that does is just gives us that brushed metal look. And we can also reduce the opacity slightly, something like that's fine. So you're starting to see the power that we have with those layer styles. And I think what we might also do is, just at the moment we've got a drop shadow, but just to give it a global illuminated sort of shadow effect, we're also going to include, if we highlight the base plate layer, I'm going to move to layer styles and just go for an outer glow. And at the moment that outer glow is a yellow color by default, a yellowy white. We're just going to change that to a black, and we'll change the blend mode to normal, and now we can see what's happening there. So we just reduce the size, increase the spread a little, bring the size back in, and that just gives us a little bit of a hard edge around the plate without having to use stroke, which would be another alternative. And you'll see as we start to get a little bit more detail into this logo that's quite a valuable little step that we've done there. And the next thing we need to do is create a sort of a circular round plate, and like a name plate. So if we grab our base background and Control D. We'll just move that above our base plate, and this time we're going to use an ellipse mask, and double click on the ellipse mask. We'll hide the background layer, and if we click on the mask we can Control T, and we're just going to bring that in to something about that size that sits on our plate, and that's looking fine. And we'll just rename this round plate. And the next thing we need to do with this is pre-comp it, because we're going to be going for a slightly shinier plate and not so much the brushed metal look. We're going to do that in a pre-composition. So if we highlight the plate and click Layer, Pre-Compose, and round plate comp is fine, and we want to move all attributes and open the new layer, and that brings us into a new composition, our round plate composition. And we're going to create a new solid, and this time we'll just make it white. We'll click OK, and we're going to drag that underneath, and we'll just hide the round plate for now. And up in our effects we're going to right click, Noise and Grain, Fractal Noise, and this time we're going to go for quite a large noise. Basic fractal type is fine. We're going to go for a little bit more contrast, something like that, and then we'll go into our transform settings and bring the scale up quite considerably. Now down in our layers, what we want to do is just switch our toggles down here, and we want to create a alpha matte. And what that does is uses the round plate that we created to punch out an alpha'd version of that noise. We'll just rename this noise, and just under the fractal noise we're going to say blur and sharpen. We'll go for a fast blur, and we'll just increase it till we get something that we like, and that's looking pretty good. It's supposed to represent a reflected, a sort of a blurred reflected effect. And we can come back into our master now, and we can apply some layer effects to that pre-comp from back out here in the master. So if we go layer styles, first we want is a drop shadow, and this time in the drop shadow we're going to just make the distance 0, and that gives a uniform shadow all the way around. And the size, we can crank that out just a little bit, and that's looking okay. And the next layer style for that one is a bevel and emboss, and just in that bevel emboss settings we're going to bring the size in just slightly, make it 3. Just maybe bring that depth up past 100, maybe 200% should be fine. And at the moment it's an inner bevel. We'll see what just an emboss looks like, and that's looking pretty good. And the next thing we need to do is maybe give it a bit of a gradient overlay. So if we click on our layer styles, gradient overlay, and we'll just go into those gradient settings. We'll switch the blending mode to overlay, and we'll just go into our gradient settings again, and we want to do a similar technique that we used before, so white at either ends, and in the center 100, and on the edges 0 for opacity. We'll click OK to that. We're just going to play with the scale a little bit. Just bring the scale in just so that it goes through the center of the letters there, and that's looking pretty good. I think our noise can come down a little bit darker, so we just go back into our fractal noise settings in the pre-comp and just bring our brightness just to get a bit of contrast there. And we can always move our evolution to get a pattern that we're happy with. Something like that's working. We'll come back into our master, and it's probably a little dark now, so let's just bring our brightness back a bit. And that's working okay. Okay, so that probably takes care of our rounded plate. And the next thing we need to do is give it some rivets. So if we take our light grey base layer, Control D, move it up above the plate, unhide, and just rename this rivets. And what we need to do is use our elliptical tool, and this time we'll just draw just next to the C here a circle, and we can use our shift button to make sure that it stays completely round. And now we'll just zoom in here slightly, and we'll move that over to this area here. And that's looking okay. Now we'll apply a layer style to the rivets. So bring up our layer styles, and we'll put a drop shadow on it first, and with the drop shadow we want a distance of 0 and probably a size of about 1. Maybe bring that size up slightly, and we'll just take multiply off. We'll go normal on this one, bring the opacity up on it, and just maybe bring that spread out slightly, not too much. Something there. We're just going for a basic all around drop shadow on that element. And the next thing we need to do is give it a layer style of bevel and emboss, and straight away there you see that we're getting that rivet effect. And so if we come into our bevel and emboss, and we just want to increase the size, and we might just increase these values here, probably about 70 on the shadow. And because it's a silvery sort of material, we'll leave the highlight fairly high, and that's probably looking pretty good. We'll probably bring the size up a little bit more now. Maybe bring the depth down a little. And we might even give this rivet a gradient overlay. So we'll give a layer style gradient overlay, and we'll just go into our gradient. We'll do the same as before. Just come into our settings here, swap this one to white, and change our outer opacities to 0. And what we might even do is change our gradient type to radial. And we'll just go back into our style there again. We'll get rid of this one, and we'll change this far left. So that's going to work okay. We can probably even no, we'll leave that one white. And that's probably working the way we want it. So let's grab this mask, Control D, which gives us 2 masks, and with the second one selected, Control T will allow us to move it or resize it, but in this case we just want to move it over. We'll come out a little bit to line it up. and that's going to work right there. Okay, so we have our rivets there, and that's working fine. And the next thing we need to do is, you'll notice that in our text it's supposed to be punching out of this plate, but we're not seeing that brushed metal underneath there. Let's just go to our base plate, grab our fractal noise, Control C, and come to our CG Swot text and Control V just to type it in there. And what we want to do is go into our layer styles. We'll leave that as an overlay, but we'll come into our layer styles, and in our advanced blending, this is for the text layer, we're just going to bring our fill opacity up a little bit, and you'll see there that that brushed metal starts to come back in, and that's working quite well. So we'll unhide our background, and we might as well put our adjustment layer. So if we go layer, new, adjustment layer, and this is for our color correction, and we'll just right click, color correction, and we want hue and saturation, and we'll colorize, and we'll change our hue until we come into a sort of a blue, pale blue, and then we want to darken it down slightly and bring the saturation out just slightly. You just want it on the edge of grey and blue, and that's looking pretty good out there. We'll probably darken it just slightly, say -25 in this instance should be fine. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is our base plate, our background. So we'll just rename this base plate BG, and what we're going to do is pre-comp this. So if we go layer, pre-compose, and we might just call it BG comp, and we'll open the new, click OK. Okay, now we need to put some dents on this, and it's supposed to represent a checker plate. So if we duplicate our base plate BG, Control D, I'm just going to rename this Dents 1, and the first thing we need to do, we'll just hide that base plate, and we're going to use our elliptic mask tool. We'll just double click on it, Control T, and we're just going to bring that in, scale it down, just come in here a little tighter, slide it over. So there's one of our dents there, and what we're going to do is duplicate that mask, Control D, and then Control T will allow us to maneuver it over to the left. And we just want to, you'll notice that our center point for the layer is just inside there. What we're going to do is just grab both the masks, Control T, and just slide them over just slightly. Okay, with the Dents 1 layer selected, we're going to right click in our effects, and actually we'll type in over here, it's CC Collider is the effect we'll be using. So if you type KAL, you'll get Collider here, CC Collider. Let's drag it onto Dents 1, and the mirroring type, you'll see that Collider does this kaleidoscopic effect, and the one we're looking for is Unfold. And straight away there, if we grab both of our masks, we can bump it a little bit together. We get 4 strokes from 2. And then if we highlight both of those masks and Control D and just drag them so that they're next to one another, 3 and 4 here, and just with 3 and 4 selected, we're just going to drag it up and bring it over. What we need to do at this stage is just reduce our size a little bit. Probably about, I think 10 is probably what we need. And if we just grab our 3 and 4 mask, Control T, just drag it back over until we get our 4 there. And it looks like our masks might be a little bit big, so we can just reduce our scale on our masks a little. Move it slightly over there. We'll grab mask 1 and 2, Control T, and we just want to do the same. Just so that we get a fairly uniform look. Bump it back over, and that's half of our design there. So if we grab Dents 1 and Control D, and what we want to do is bring up our masks, highlight all of the masks, Control T, just come in here slightly, and we want to rotate them around 90 degrees, and we'll just bump them down a little and move them until we get a repeat of what we're looking for. And that's probably pretty close. Certainly not perfect, but it's close enough to what we need. So there's our checker plate design, and what we're going to do is in the Dents 01, we're just going to right click, bring up our layer styles. We're going to go for a bevel and emboss, and now we can unhide our background layer to see how that's reading, and it looks pretty good as is. We'll just go into that bevel and emboss and just slightly change the size a little. Let's bring the size down to about 2. See how that looks, and that's going to work quite nicely. That's probably all we need for those. And if we just bring up our layer styles, Control C, and then in the Dents 2, Control V, and if we come back into our master, we'll see that we have our checker plate now. And there's probably one more thing that we can do with our base plate here. We're going to right click, layer styles, gradient overlay, and we'll go into our gradient. We'll change our angle to about 45 degrees, make it minus 45. I like the dark on the right hand side a little better. We'll just go into our edit gradient, and if we just reduce this black to a little bit more of a grey, and we'll reduce this white to a little bit more of a grey, but then in the middle we'll create a new swatch and just give it a little bit more of a highlight through the middle, and that's looking pretty good. Come back to our master, and our checker plate is looking pretty cool. Okay, so we need to just start to think about the colors and the contrast, but for the end effect I wanted to use a light, so it's important to get that into the scene before we start tweaking with colors. So if we just select new light, and we want a point light, 150 is fine, all those settings seem fine, we'll click OK. And what we want to do is we just position this light up at the top here, and in our layers I want to switch all of our layers to 3D layers. And if I take my light and just go to a top view, just bring it over a little closer to the panels. I'm going to take my BG comp and just push it back in Z space a little bit, and my round plate, I'm just going to move it forward slightly. My rivets a little bit forward again, and my CG Swot text to sit on top. So really not a lot of depth except for that BG plate. So we go back to our active camera and we'll just scale up that background just slightly so that it fits, and you'll see that we're getting a little bit better effect here with the lighting. And we might just adjust the lighting intensity, maybe go up to about 200. That's working pretty well. Now I don't like the noise that's on the round plate, so if we just go back to the round plate comp, I want to increase the size of that noise, the scale. So we'll go to something quite big, and then we'll just play with the evolution until we get something that we're happy with. Maybe even play with the offset. Okay, I think the size can come up a little bit more, and then we'll just play with that evolution until we get something that we like. Maybe just move the turbulent offset slightly, something like that, and then maybe even decrease the contrast a little bit, and brightness. We just got to play with this until we get something that we're happy with. Something like that's probably going to work okay. We'll go back to our master, and it's a little bit dark, so we'll just brighten it up a little. A little bit more contrast. And that's probably going to work for us. Okay, so I think what we need to do now is play with some of the material settings for these layers, and we'll work on that round plate first. Now that it's a 3D layer, we have material options, and I just want to bring the shininess up and the specular, and just bring the metal down a little bit, bring the diffuse up, maybe bring the shininess and that's working okay. And we'll just go now to the base plate, do the same. We're just going into that material options. I probably just want to bring that shininess up a little bit, give it a little bit more specular. Just bring the metal setting down, give it a little bit more diffuse, something like that. Should be fine. And I think I might just adjust some of the text layer style settings here, and just go into the bevel and emboss and just tighten that size up a little bit. Probably go 1.5 and maybe take it from screen to normal and crank up the highlight and crank up the shadow. And I think what we might do also is just add a layer style inner shadow, and that just helps it pop a little more inside there. Might just go into the inner shadow there, given that the light is from the top. We could always use the global lighting, but this gives us a little bit more control. And we'll just put the angle towards the top there a little more, and that's looking pretty good. So just collapse some of these. Can probably play with the adjustment layer, bring a little bit more saturation into it. Brightness up. Okay, so there you have it. Quite an easy effect there. I might just bump our base plate over, our background plate over a little bit. You'll see that it's sort of causing a little bit of funny design along the edge there. So if I just grab our background comp and nudge it in behind there, and that works fine. And we might even just adjust our light, bring it up just a little brighter, and maybe even bring it out front a bit, drop it down in brightness now. Okay, well there you have it. Using nothing but the built-in effects, and we only used a couple: fractal noise, CC collider, and a little bit of masking, and mostly just layer styles. And there's a whole lot more we could have done, but given the time constraints, I wanted to keep it fairly short and basic. You've got a fairly simple logo design there, and really the main purpose of the tutorial was just to introduce some of those principles of layer styles. And given that they're animatable, we could always animate the gradients across the surfaces. We could add a little bit more noise to make it look a little bit more metallic. But hopefully you'll experiment now and play a little bit with layer styles in After Effects instead of doing it all in Photoshop and bringing it all across. So that's it for me. Until next time, bye for now.